all know that no one is an island, but the rise of solo journalists introduces new concerns and the need for collaboration to maintain excellence. Karen Ward Brooks knows all about this from her decades in this business, and she explains it in Mojos and Sojos still need to get their group on.
I was in Austin, Texas recently, and I had a great meal at a Tex-Mex place. As I was enjoying it, I started thinking about how many people it probably took to put that meal together. Somebody probably worked on the guacamole, somebody else probably worked on the fajitas, and maybe a third person worked on the tortillas and chips for me. It was a great meal. Now, of course, one cook could have put that whole meal together in a kitchen that was stocked with all the tools and all the ingredients, but I don't think that meal would have been as good. The same is in sports. I was watching the Olympics, and it occurred to me just how many people it takes to help an athlete get that gold medal, right? It takes coaches, trainers, teammates, friends, family. Now, an athlete can walk into the gym and do the workout by himself, but I don't think he would get that gold medal without the help of everyone else. So it's absurd to think in journalism that one person working with one backpack can produce excellence. We hear a lot about mobile journalists and solo journalists and one-man bands. But to think that Sojos, Mojos, and one person working by his or herself can create excellence is wrong. It's not going to work. We need collaboration. We need cooperation. We live in a time of citizen journalists. Everybody has a phone with a camera that takes still pictures and video pictures. Everybody can get on the internet and post a blog. So it's the rich collaboration between journalists that separates the professionals from the rest. This is not my purse. This is the multimedia kit that we give every Medill student when he or she walks through the door. Where's my camera? Has a camera, takes still pictures, takes video, records audio, right? It's got a tripod, holds the camera steady. It's got a bag for audio equipment, includes a lavalier mic. There's another little bag in here. Another little bag that holds extra lenses, right? And we teach our students to use all those tools. We teach them to report and to write and to edit and to post, and we even teach them coding in small doses. But we don't make them do it alone. We edit them, we coach them, we partner them with peers. It might be true that too many cooks spoil the broth, but too few journalists make the journalism thin. We're hearing more and more about taking journalists out of the mix. A Pew Research Center study on the state of the news media found that 18% of large market news directors, that's New York, LA, and Chicago, 18% said yes, they mostly use one-man bands. That's up from 15% in 2009. When you look at small markets, small television markets, the numbers are even more dramatic. 6% in 2009, 6% of small market news directors said they mostly use one-man bands. 2 years later, that was up to 25%. So the Pew study also defined multimedia journalist for us. It defined a multimedia journalist or a digital journalist or a backpack journalist, whatever you want to call them, as a local news reporter working with a variety of tools to produce stories for delivery on broadcast, on the web, or on mobile devices. And it concluded that the reason for the increase in multimedia journalists is the explosion of inexpensive video cameras and laptop editing software. They're easy to use and they're cost effective. But just because the number of multimedia journalists are on the rise doesn't mean it's anything new. You may remember Al Franken before he was a senator. He was in the cast of Saturday Night Live. He had a recurring role as a reporter for the Weekend Update, in which he reported live from everywhere with a satellite dish on his head. The ultimate one-man band, right? It's funny, but it's not that far from reality. Today we have the Flyaway unit. It's basically a satellite system in a box the size of a steamer trunk that one person can put together and use. It's good for coverage in places like Sudan, but it's not optimal for all coverage. When I was a newly minted MSJ from Medill, I wanted to be a television reporter, and my role model was Jessica Savage. There we are. I got my first job at an ABC affiliate in Fort Myers, Florida, and I was a one-man band. And I can tell you, in those days, maybe just my microphone and a couple of cables fit in the backpack. My one-man band didn't play for very long, thankfully, only about a year, before I realized that my best effort was in helping a team. It was in producing programs that are interesting and informative and helpful to an audience. Today, one of the most notable examples of collaborative journalism comes from the New York Times, a story called Snowfall, the Avalanche at Tunnel Creek. It was published in December of 2012. The Times public editor, Margaret Sullivan, said initially it received 3.5 million page views. It also won a Pulitzer Prize. Snowfall is about skiers and snowboarders who were trapped in an avalanche in Washington State's Cascade Mountains. What's remarkable about it is the way it weaves video, text, graphics, and audio into one coherent story. Previously, the thinking was there was one main story, and it was usually text, and everything around it was supplemental. Well, this turned that on its head. John Branch is the reporter on Snowfall, and he gets the byline. But there are 16 people credited at the end of the article. So it took a team. This is the opposite of the one-man band. This is the full orchestra playing. And to be sure, budgets don't allow the full orchestral treatment for every story, but I would say we need more orchestra treatment and fewer solos. Even before there was multimedia, journalists knew they couldn't do their best work in a bubble. The Watergate break-in, the first story on the Watergate break-in appeared in the Washington Post on June 18, 1972. The headline read, "5 held in plot to bug Democrats' office here." And Alfred E. Lewis had the byline. There were 8 contributors to that story. Of course, 2 of them were Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein. Woodward and Bernstein's first story on the break-in appeared the next day, but even they didn't do it by themselves. There were 6 contributors listed on that story. If journalists need more proof that collaboration is the way to go, they can look to the business world. Microsoft did an international study in 2006 on collaboration. And what they found were that companies that were connected, companies where employees talked to each other and collaborated, did better in the things that are most important to businesses: profitability, profit growth, and sales growth. I would say that every journalist should think of every story as a joint venture. I like to tell my students that no reporter is an island. And I usually say this when we're talking about ethics and big, difficult decisions that they should not be making by themselves. But I would also say that no reporter is an island when it comes to their storytelling. Perhaps the best analogy on collaboration is in the sports world. Whether it's basketball, baseball, football, hockey, coaches preach above all else the team. In 1980, the miracle on ice happened. The U.S. men's hockey team beat a supposedly invincible Russian team, and they did it with teamwork. LeBron James left Cleveland. That was a controversial decision for him. He felt he couldn't get it done with the team he had there. He went to Miami. He collaborated with Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh, and they got it done twice. NBA championships in 2012 and 2013. I won my first Emmy Award for a story on Hurricane Andrew that hit Florida in August of 1992. This was a look at the hurricane 6 months later. When I received that assignment, I asked my boss, great, who am I working with? They said, no one. I was back to my one-man band, but this time I was smarter, and I knew that wasn't going to work. And so I coerced, and I cajoled, and I bargained with every reporter in the television station to take a little piece of that program, whether it was the infrastructure problems, the insurance issues, or the health care effects. I was driving the bus, but I had plenty of people helping me navigate. And what came out of that was something pretty special. It was a program that was interesting, but more importantly, was helpful and insightful and informative to the audience. I recently heard from someone who surprised me when he talked about the need for collaboration. His name is Dan Gable. Dan Gable is to wrestling what Michael Jordan is to basketball. In his collegiate career as a wrestler, he won 118 matches and he lost one. He's an Olympic gold medalist, and at the University of Iowa, he coached 15 teams to national championships. And I saw him at a recent wrestling match at the University of Iowa. Full disclosure, my son Sam is on the team. They lost, and they lost badly. They did far worse than expectations. And I said to Dan Gable, what can the coaches do to help this team reach its potential? He said, they need help. He said, I didn't coach 15 national championship teams by myself. I had help, a lot of help. And I think the same thing is true for journalists. We can't put our journalistic eggs all in one backpack and expect to pull out excellence. Journalists can't be an army of one. Journalists need to be innovative. They need to be creative. Journalists need to be great. And they can only do that together. The bottom line for journalists is we need each other.